solutions. So the past few classes, we've been talking a lot about, actually, for the entirety of this semester, we've been talking a lot about a bunch of different environmental problems. But for this class and for the next few classes, we're going to move away from just talking about the problems and designing solutions. So the next few classes are going to ask us to try to balance the needs of humans and the needs of the environment to find solutions to our environmental problems. So the problem that we're going to discuss today is an insect problem, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Today's warm-up question is, when we think about changing the environment, what are some factors we should consider? So for example, what should we think about before we build a bridge, as an example? This is a very open-ended question, so like whatever you think we should consider is something you should write. Personally, I think that I think the four things that I like to consider when I'm evaluating environmental solutions or solutions to environmental problems is first is how our ecosystem is going to be affected. Second, how is human health going to be affected? So whatever we do, is it going to affect humans' health in a bad way? Third, how is human safety going to be affected? And then lastly, how might the economy be affected? So how will people lose their jobs? Will it change what resources there are available for people? And how are we going to reduce those changes? So anyway, you can answer that however you want on Google Classroom. As always, please use your own thoughts and your own words and avoid using Google. So the example was about, for example, what should we think about before we build a bridge? Here is a bridge that was kind of built, it looks like it was built through a forest. And so whoever built this bridge was probably thinking about humans' need for easy transportation and the needs of the local ecosystem. And it looks like whoever built this bridge kind of had to figure out a good balance between them. And at the end of the day, the person who made this bridge probably decided that humans' need for easy transportation was more important than the environment, or more important than the ecosystem. Because when this bridge was built, undoubtedly, it destroyed some parts of the ecosystem, destroyed some habitats, and that's just a decision that the maker had to make. Whereas if we look at this bridge, this is a land bridge. And so the land bridge it's a really cool bridge. It's actually not meant for humans. It's meant for animals. So this bridge allows animals to cross highways without having to actually cross the road, where they could easily get hit and killed. So whoever built this bridge was definitely the most important thing in their mind was the ecosystem, keeping these ecosystems intact, because now animals can freely move across this bridge. So today's agenda, we just did the warm-up. Next, we're going to introduce the insect problem. Third, we'll explore solutions. And then lastly, we'll do our exit slip. So the focus question for today is, what are some ways to deal with an insect problem? And the learning target is, I can explain how to balance human needs with those of the environment. So like I said, this should say where we are coming from, but so far we have learned that humans can cause changes to ecosystems. And although we cause a lot of environmental problems, we humans also have the ability to solve them. So in the next few lessons, we're going to examine environmental problems and evaluate solutions for those problems, or design solutions for those problems. So today's problem is an insect problem. So there's a bit of a story here. The story is, Holly sat in the shade and watched her parents talking. She couldn't hear everything that they said, but she knew what they were talking about. In all the years that she lived on the farm, she had never seen them so worried. She turned to look at the fields that surrounded the house. Holly felt sad as she saw the large areas where the crops were damaged or dead. She knew that her parents were discussing what they could do about the insect that was damaging the crops. Holly's parents had bought the farm when she was 5 years old, and now that she was in middle school, it seemed like she had lived on the farm all of her life. Jumping to her feet, Holly moved towards her parents to join in the discussion. So the important thing about this is that Holly's family's farm, is being attacked by a bunch of insects. And so before we even get into to solutions that other farmers have tried, right now, by yourself, brainstorm for just a couple seconds. What are some ways that Holly and her family could solve the insect problem? All right. So there are some solutions that other farmers have tried to get an insect problem under control. So Holly and her family are going to look at Holly and her family are considering 4 different control methods, and you're going to take a look at them and you're going to recommend one of them. So on Google Classroom, there's a post called Lesson 19, Insect Problem Control Methods. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at the 4 different control methods, and you're going to read them. There's a paragraph after each method. You're going to figure out what the advantages of each, figure out the advantages and disadvantages of each control method. So there are 4 control methods altogether, so you're going to write, you're going to do this chart 4 times. And then at the end, at the bottom, there is a question that you cannot forget to do. The question is, which solution would you recommend to Holly's family? Why? So you can just write your answer here. So after filling out the charts, make sure that you answer this question. And then in class, we talked about which of the solutions we thought would be best. So secretly, all 4 of these solutions are viable solutions. Actually, that's not even a secret. These are all valid solutions. These are all solutions that we could do. But people have different answers based on how they consider different factors. So for example, if we're considering human health, then we wouldn't want to do chemical control because pesticides could be bad for human health. So we might choose one of these other options. If we're thinking only about how these options might affect Holly's family's finances, so like how it's going to affect Holly, the amount of money that Holly's family has, then we might choose we might choose maybe biological control, which is where we add a predator to the farm, and that predator will take care of the insect problem. And so there are lots of different ways that we can think about it, and different factors that we think are important are going to change our answers. So any of these answers are valid, but I do want to talk a little bit more about the biological control. So the biological control is, in this case, biological control means introducing a predator to the farm to eat all the insects. And this is actually based on a real problem. So the situation we've been discussing is based on what happened in Australia in the 1930s, when cane beetles and French beetles, which are both native to the ecosystem, both these kinds of beetles were devastating Australian sugar cane crops. Sugar cane, it's kind of like a really thin tree, and that's what we make sugar from. But this was an important crop especially in northern Australia. So farmers or the local governments introduced cane toads in order to control the insect problem. So this is a cane toad. And so cane toads are non-native species. They're actually from South America. So we're going to watch a video that sort of explains how cane toads have come to, I don't know, well, we're going to see how cane toads continue to exist in Australia, and actually how that's a big problem. So king toads are an example of an invasive species, just like zebra mussels. And yeah, so king toads are an invasive species. They were brought to Australia from South America, like 90 years ago, and they don't have any natural predators. As we heard in the video, that if anything tries to eat a king toad, it's going to die because of all the poison in the frog, in the toad. The exception being meat ants, but meat ants haven't quite figured out where exactly cane toads live yet. But this is the problem with biological control. Even though biological control sounds really nice, because it's almost no work for humans. It doesn't affect our health. It can create a lot of harm in the ecosystem. Basically, anytime you're adding a new species to an ecosystem, or even adding more like organisms or more individuals of a species into an ecosystem, we can run into some problems. But anyway, regardless, all of these options are viable and valid. They all come with their own advantages and disadvantages. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about biological control. So that's it. The last thing we need to do is look at the exit slip. So the exit slip has 2 questions, and you cannot do this exit slip until you've finished the worksheet from earlier. So the questions are, number 1 says, what factors did you consider when deciding what solution to recommend? So that means when you were deciding which of the solutions Holly's family should choose, what factors were you thinking about? Were you thinking about human health? Were you thinking about the economy? Were you thinking about the ecosystem? What were you thinking about? And then the second thing says, what other information would have been useful when you were considering solutions? All right. If you have any questions, let me know. You can leave a private comment on Google Classroom. And otherwise, I hope to see you in class next time. Bye.